Hello and welcome to our Winter of Reading 2025 Winter Book Buzz. I'm Dodie from the Central Library of Denver Public Library, and I'm here with my colleague Amanda to bring you 30 fabulous titles in less than 45 minutes. Keep in mind that the books that we're talking about are in order of publication. Our first book has already been published. The final book will not come out till April. And most of these books will eventually become available as ebooks and eAudiobooks. So just keep an eye on our catalog. And now my colleague Amanda will start us off.
Right. Our first book is American Bulk, Essays on Excess by Emily Mester. This is a nonfiction book and essay collection and part memoir as well. The author, Emily Mester, covers her relationship with stuff and consumerism. So she talks about her life and some of the joys she's had with consumerism. Oftentimes folks talk about how having stuff is bad, but Mester argues that it can actually bring you joy. So she talks about the 90s shopping mall days, going to Olive Garden or Costco with her family, but she also takes a critique on capitalism and corporate America, asking what drives our impulses to consume, who's actually benefiting from consumerism. So if you like kind of short and sweet nonfiction essay collections, this is a great one to check out. And our next book is Kingdom of No Tomorrow by Fabienne Josephat. This is a historical fiction book all about the Black Panther Party. And it is set in 1968, Oakland, California. This follows Nettie Boileau, who's a public health student from Haiti, and she ends up finding work at the Black Panther Party's free outreach health clinics. And it's at one of these clinics that she begins an affair with Melvin Mosley, who is the Black Panther Party defense captain. Melvin sweeps Nettie off her feet. She believes this is true love and a great relationship, so when she ends up pregnant, she does follow Melvin to Chicago, where he tries to start the first chapter of the Black Panther Party there, but Nettie very quickly realizes that Melvin is not who she thought he was. And this is very much a story about J. Edgar Hoover's covert campaigns, that he targeted Black civil rights leaders during this time. Nettie herself ends up being targeted because of her involvement in the party. And it's a really great historical look at how Black women were treated even amidst the revolution that was happening at that time.
Our next book is The Peculiar Garden of Harriet Hunt, and this is from Colorado author Chelsea Iverson. This is very much a book of magic realism. Harriet is verging on destitute. Her mother is mostly absent, and her father is gone, and they have no income. As Harriet is forced to sell things around the house to keep them warm and fed, she also has to keep her secret of her special relationship with her plants in her garden. Plums ripen at her touch, and thorns don't scratch her. It seems that her only recourse is to become a wife, and when Christian Comstock comes to town and sweeps her off her feet, she agrees to get married, only to find out that Christian only had one interest, and that is her father's fortune. Harriet is left to fend for herself as her cousin and best friend Eunice has been forced to move far away, and Harriet realizes that the garden may be her best friend and be the thing that saves her. This is a beautiful book that you'll cherish. The next book is The Irish Girl by Ashley Sweeney from the very feminist press, She Writes Press. It's early 1980s, and Mary Agnes is banished from Ireland by her mother and is sent to Chicago to live with her uncle and family. She realizes that she's just another mouth to feed and doesn't like the work she's doing in Chicago, so takes the chance to go to Colorado and explore the opportunities that wait in the new frontier. After several months in Colorado, tragedy strikes, and she decides to go back to Chicago to reform her life there. This is definitely a coming-of-age story set against the Great Migration across the West in the United States, and fans of historical fiction will really dig it. The next book is a cozy mystery titled Knife Skills for Beginners by Orlando Murin. This is called Knives Out meets Top Chef meets The Maid, and it's a debut cozy mystery. This takes place at the Chester Square Cookery School in the heart of London. And to be honest, Chef Paul Delamar's cookery school has seen better times. But he decides to restore the school to glory by having a festive weekend and invites people to come to the culinary school to not only learn how to cook, but to eat. All goes well until the morning after the debut dinner. Paul's knife is found in the chest of a guest. Paul knows that he has to find the murderer, or the murder will be pinned on him. This is full of funny culinary puns, some interesting meals, and a very closed room mystery that readers will love to help Paul figure out the mystery. The next book is Y2K by Colette Shade. She's an essayist, a pop culture fan, and I think we all remember back in 1999 when we were pretty sure that at the stroke of midnight on the last day of January, planes would fall from the sky, our phone service would go out, the internet would disappear, but then none of that happened. Shade divides our pop culture history in before 2000 and after 2000. Whoever thought that they'd be walking around with a high-grade, high-accuracy, high-access computer in their pocket all day, called a phone? Before 2000, people didn't think it was possible. After 2000, the expectations are even higher. This is perfect for fans of Gia Tolentini and Chuck Klosterman. The Power of Nuclear, The Rise, Fall, and Return of Our Mightiest Energy Source from Marco Vischer is the next title. This nonfiction title explores the dawn of the atomic age and brings us up to date on where we are now with using nuclear energy in our country. Britain has gotten rid of its last coal mine, and most of Europe runs on nuclear energy. But why not the US? Is our history with 3 Mile Island too close? Marco Vischer believes that using nuclear energy can save the United States from more polluting energy sources and also spread the energy grid out wider and make it safer for small towns and big cities to use. This is maybe one-sided and a little bit optimistic, but definitely worth the read.
The next book is Wake Up and Open Your Eyes by Claude McLeod Chapman. This is the first horror book on this list, and this author, Chapman, really likes to write social horror, so commentary on current happenings in society today. And this book follows Noah Fairchild, who lives in Brooklyn, New York, and Noah has parents who really like conspiracy theories. They consume a lot of extremist media, and he's used to hearing them talk about the next big thing that's happening through the media. And so when his mother leaves him a voicemail all about the Great Reawakening, Noah just ignores it. But when he stops hearing from his parents, he starts getting a little bit worried and decides to drive all the way back to Richmond, Virginia to check in on his parents. And that's when the true horror really starts happening. The house is in disarray, there's trash and garbage everywhere, and he finds his parents sitting in front of the TV that's just playing static. They're in a trance and they won't look away. And when he finally gets his mother to turn away from the TV, that's when she attacks him. So this is a very intense story about media use, consumerism. He has technology throughout, social media and video transcripts, really bringing this story to life. So if you like emotional, intense, and thoughtful horror, this book might be for you. The next book is The Crazies by Amy Gamerman. This is a nonfiction story, and the tagline for it is Cowboys and Billionaire Cowboys. This is a story about the American West and a range war that's taking place between ranchers and billionaires. The story follows Rick Jarrett, who is a fifth-generation rancher who's been struggling to make ends meet. So he decides to find new income through a wind farm. Big Timber, Montana, the town at the foot of the Crazy Mountains, is one of the windiest cities in America. But of course, these mountains are also very scenic and beautiful, so it is home to many wealthy and well-connected ranchers and hobby ranchers. And so when Rick Jarrett starts trying to create this wind farm, they don't want their mountain views obstructed by windmills and wind turbines. This kicks off a power struggle over the West's beautiful landscapes. It focuses on this one story, but is very much about our claim over nature, nature's power over us, and how climate change interacts with making your way in the West and keeping your generation going. The next book is The In-Between Bookstore by Edward Underhill. This story is very similar to The Midnight Library by Matt Haig, and it's from a debut author, or an adult debut from typically a young adult author. The story follows Darby, who went and sought a new life for himself out in New York City, leaving his small hometown behind. Years later, Darby ended up unemployed and broke, about to turn 30, and so decides to move back home for a fresh start. And like himself, Oak Falls, Illinois, his hometown, has gone through a big transition, but the one thing that has stayed the same is the bookstore that Darby used to work at, In Between Books. When Darby goes inside just to check out the store, everything kind of looks very, very similar, eerily similar. And when he looks behind the register, he sees his 16-year-old self standing there. So what would you do if you came across your old self? Would you try and change your future for the better? What kind of path would you take? It's also a story about books, so if you're a person who loves books about books, this could be for you. Our next book is Hamajang Luck by Makana Yamamoto. This is a science fiction space heist story. Hamajang is a Hawaiian adjective that means disorderly or chaotic, and that is very much the vibe of this book. The story follows Edie, who spent the last 8 years behind bars. They had a life of crime doing heists and was about to bring down a trillionaire tech mogul when they were betrayed by their partner in crime, Angel. So when Edie gets the chance at early parole, the catch is that they have to do one last job to earn their freedom. And of course, the person they have to work with is Angel, the one who sold them out. But, the two of them have changed. It's been a long time, so surely nothing's going to go wrong. This has a lot of genre blending, a great sci-fi setting, a lot of action and crime, some romance and found family, so there's a little bit of something for everybody. The next book is I Am Nobody's Slave by Lee Hawkins. This is a memoir, and Lee Hawkins was a Pulitzer Prize finalist back in 2022. He did a lot of investigative journalism and writing about the Tulsa Race Massacre, and upon doing this research, decided to continue on looking specifically at his own family. Throughout the memoir, Lee Hawkins goes back over 400 years of his family history using genealogy resources and historical documents. What he ends up discovering is a legacy of trauma and violence. This trauma and violence has created lasting effects all the way into the current generation. It ends up coming into mental health, physical health, socioeconomic statuses, and chronic stress. And so Hawkins argues that going throughout this journey and learning his family history really helped heal him and understand both his family and himself. Argues that genealogy research could be a method of healing for other folks and Black Americans who have a similar issue. This is a really vulnerable and introspective book, all about healing and legacy.
Part myth retelling, part character study, Helen of Troy, 1993, by Maria Zoccola, is a visceral debut poetry collection that reimagines Helen of Troy from Homer's Iliad as a disgruntled housewife in 1990s Troy, Tennessee. This is not the epic Helen of Troy that set 1,000 ships a sail or made men die for her beauty. This is Helen of Troy, Tennessee, who goes to football games, church potlucks, and does her shopping at the Piggly Wiggly. It is full of little Easter eggs that throw back to the Iliad version of Helen of Troy, but here the speaker is contemporary, powerful, and unique. The Southern idioms and phrases are fluent and hilarious. Next time you're at the Dollar General, you might think that you see Helen in line.
Our next book is Loose Lips by Kemper Donovan. This is a locked room mystery, or I will say locked ship mystery, that takes place on a cruise ship. The story follows Belle Kerr, who is a crime novelist and a ghostwriter, who ends up on this cruise called the Get Lit Cruise as a teacher for wealthy literature fans. She's teaching writing and helping people figure out how to become crime novelists themselves. Also on this cruise are Peyton Garrett and Flora Fortescue. These are both MFA classmates from Belle's writing program who have a bit of a rivalry going on. Someone may or may not have stolen the idea for a novel, which is a big no-no in the writing world. And while Belle is on this cruise just trying to keep her head down and make some money, one of the attendees on the ship ends up dead, and a few others are poisoned. Belle can't help but put her own detective skills to the test to see if her writing chops can translate into real life. This writer also hosts the All About Agatha podcast, so you can find a lot of Agatha Christie influence throughout the story. Our next book is Blob, a Love Story by Maggie Sue. This is one of the weirder books on our list here and is following a trend of weird girl fiction that we've seen in publishing lately. These stories often follow women grappling with identity and their desires through a very strange and unconventional storytelling. This story follows Vi Liu, who is a young Taiwanese American woman who's always felt like an outsider. She goes through a really nasty breakup and drops out of college and kind of hits bottom and starts drinking a lot. So when one of her coworkers asks her to go out for a night, she says yes. And upon taking a break, she goes outside, and in the alley next to a trash can, she sees on the ground a blob with tiny beady black eyes. Vi, in her drunken state, decides to take the blob home with her and names it Bob. She discovers that he's actually sentient and can influence what he likes to do. Vi decides that this is the great opportunity to turn Bob into her dream boyfriend. So she feeds him a diet of sugary cereal and pop culture, and at first things are great, but as Bob becomes more and more human, he starts feeling trapped by Vi. She's forced to face her feelings of loneliness and her self-destructive tendencies, and this ends up being a really strange and funny but heartfelt story about being human.
Lena Crow is the author of our next book, Sinkhole and Other Inexplicable Voids. This is a short story collection exploring the sacrifices women make for their loved ones amidst the devastating realities of climate change. This covers so many current events: windstorms, wildfires, heat, well, and not yet plague, but that's coming. Most of these stories are set in the Pacific Northwest around Mount Rainier. And two of the stories, Sinkhole and the Sundance Kid Might Have Some Regrets, have already been picked up for film production by Jordan Peele's Monkey Paw Productions and Universal Pictures. Crow's mix of surrealist charm and searing reality makes for an unforgettable and moving collection of stories that seek to reflect on the fragility of the natural world, our role in its future, and how to preserve our humanity along the way. Kira Jane Buxton's Tartufo takes readers on an armchair holiday to a tiny Italian hamlet on the brink of collapse. Delizia returns to her hometown, Lazzarini Boscarino, after having a success in the big world of Italy, in Milan, and she comes back to save the village partly because her father, the former mayor, has passed away and has gambled away most of the town's assets with his gambling addiction. Delizia is not sure how she's going to save this town. The charming cafe in town has already had to shut down, and there's lots of small town jealousies and gossip going around. Till one day, the town's premier truffle hunter and his dog discover the world's largest truffle. Quickly, the town becomes abuzz with what to do, how to sell it. Do they collaborate with the nicer town 1 mile or so over, or do they try to sell it themselves? Eventually, Sotheby's comes to town to perform the auction, and something happens to the truffle. You'll have to read the book to find out if Lazzarini Boscarino is saved by the truffle.
Harlem Rhapsody by Victoria Christopher Murray is the first biographical fiction book to be published about Jessie Redmond Fawcett. It takes place during the Harlem Renaissance in 1919, and Jessie Redmond Fawcett has just landed her dream career as a literary editor for The Crisis. This is a renowned Black magazine published by the NAACP and founded by W.E.B. Du Bois. And as the first Black woman to edit this magazine, she feels that she has to prove herself. This is made difficult, though, because Jessie has a secret, and that is that she and Du Bois have been having a long-distance affair for years. Despite this setback, Jessie excels anyway, and she's known for discovering a lot of young, talented writers that we still know of today, such as Langston Hughes, Nella Larson, County Cullen, and Zora Neale Hurston. As Jessie's career continues to take off, she starts to clash with Du Bois and is forced to choose between her career and her relationship. This story celebrates the artistic greatness of the Harlem Renaissance, as well as the real issues of that time dealing with racism and sexism. Jessie Redmond Fawcett was one of the most influential literary editors of her time, shaping a generation of writers to come. The Lamb by Lucy Rose is a part folktale, part horror, and part love story. This is a coming-of-age tale about a mother and daughter who are living in the woods. Margot and her mother, Mama, usually have a quiet life in their cottage, but Mama has a very peculiar pastime. She loves to take in strays, people who wander off the trail and end up at their cabin door. She loves to feed them, keep them warm, fatten them up, and then she loves to eat them. There's a hunger and desire in her that she can't control. Margot turns a blind eye to this. Sometimes your mother does weird things. But that's until Eden shows up, the newest stray at their cabin. The tensions between Margot and Mama start to rise, and Margot's forced to confront her own hunger and desires before Eden is eaten by Mama. Cannibalism is coming up in literature more and more. It's an interesting way to express ways that women have been forced to swallow their rage and desires. And this is a very modern queer folktale for fans of atmospheric horror.
A 40-Year Kiss by Nicholas Butler is our next title. And I have to tell a quick story about how Butler got this idea. He lives in Wisconsin, his kids play hockey, and he drops them off at the rink several times a week, and goes to the local tavern and has a beer behind a column where nobody can see him, and he is left quietly to write his notes. One evening, though, a couple comes and sits on the other side of the column, and he starts to eavesdrop. He discovers that the two people on the other side had not spoken to each other in 40 years since their divorce. Nicholas turns this into the story of Viv and Charlie, who were hot for each other in high school, but married too young, and Viv quickly found out that Charlie brought somebody else with him to the marriage, alcohol. When Viv asks Charlie to leave it behind, he cannot, and she says it's done. He leaves town, goes on to have a somewhat successful career, burns through 2 more wives, and when he inherits his uncle's house on the outside of Chippewa Falls, the small town where this takes place, he decides to get back in touch with Viv. He calls her and asks her to meet him at a local tavern. And that's the story that Nicholas Butler bases this on. There are so many beautiful small town characters in this book. There's Blueberry the dog, and there's this older couple trying to find their way back to the love and the romance that they experienced when they were very young. This is a beautiful romantic title, perfect for Valentine's Day. Just as she did in her last book, Ms. Demeanor, Eleanor Lippman will have readers laughing out loud with this entertaining and zany novel, Every Tom, Dick, and Harry. When Emma inherits her parents' real estate business, which she does not love. She realizes that part of the job is cleaning and setting up for the sale. When she goes to a local B&B, which has contacted her for a cleanup and a staging, she realizes that for years, this B&B has actually been a brothel. Now she doesn't know how to set up the sale. Who would want to know that the house that they're moving into was a house of ill repute? Along the way, there's some borders. There's a border that she has a love interest with, and the chief of police of this small town also gets involved. Lippman will have you laughing all along the way.
This next book is the longest title on our list. It is called I Got Abducted by Aliens and Now I'm Trapped in a Rom-Com by Kimberly Lemming. This is an intergalactic adventure for romance readers who love lighthearted escape. The story follows Dorothy Valentine, who's in the final stretch of her wildlife biology PhD program. She's out on some field work and is unfortunately attacked by a lion. She thinks this is the end, but she's actually saved. However, instead of Prince Charming, she is being held captive by her alien saviors. Dory and the lion, whose name is Toto, work together to escape, because, why be enemies at this point? They crash land on an alien planet, which just so happens to be overrun with dinosaurs. On this planet, they also meet Sol and Locke, who are very dangerous but sexy aliens, according to Dory, and Dory really feels a spark with them. They go off and explore the planet, battle dinosaurs, and Dory really starts thinking, why go home when I can have adventures here? This is a very fun, lighthearted, silly book. This author, Lemming, has a great sense of humor. This is a steamy romance, and if you're just wanting to get swept away to a different world, definitely check this one out. Fundamentally, by Nusaiba Yunus, is a contemporary fiction story, and this book is loosely based on the author's own life. The author, Yunus, is an expert in Iraqi politics and foreign policy. She had the idea to lead a de-radicalization program for ISIS-affiliated women in Iraqi refugee camps. This didn't actually come to fruition for her, so she wrote a book about it. In the book, our character, Dr. Nadia Amin, gets a proposal from the United Nations to do just this. She's ready to leave London after a painful breakup and takes a leap of faith and takes the job. She quickly realizes she's in over her head, though. She has a team who's skeptical of her authority. She's not sure how to balance and work for the UN since she's never done that before. But when she goes to these camps, she meets Sarah, who is a very brash and loud person, but very magnetic. And Nadia decides that I have to figure out how to get these women home. What she ends up doing is coming up against a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of corruption, and she ends up being forced into some risky decisions that could affect both her safety and her career. Despite the serious topics here, this is a very funny story, a lot of dark humor and political commentary. The book really challenges readers to think about right versus wrong rather than who is right.
El Fuego by David Rubin is our graphic novel on the list. And this is set in the indeterminate future. And unlike the movies that we've all seen where there's a giant asteroid coming to Earth, and within the last 3 minutes of the movie, Plan A succeeds and the asteroid is destroyed, that is not what happens in this book. Plan A does not work. And Plan B is left up to a scientist, Alexander Yorba, who is also confronting his own mortality with terminal brain cancer. As readers go through the book, they'll be looking at the comparison of the scientist's sense of mortality and the world's sense of mortality. And it asked, if you knew you only had 2 months, 2 weeks, 2 days, or 2 hours left to live, how would you live that time? And who would you live it with? If you're looking for ideas on how to find peace within, you might find some here. Expect great things. How the Catherine Gibbs School Revolutionized the American Workplace for Women by Vanda Kreft is a truly uplifting and inspiring nonfiction title. It tells the splendid account of the life of Catherine Gibbs and the schools she founded, which were designed for secretarial skills. While on the outside it looked like it was all about typing 120 words a minute or doing the best steno or delivering the finest coffee, it was really about getting the women out of the secretarial pool and into the office suite to take the jobs of their bosses. And the Gibbs graduates did just that. They tackled sexism in the era and they paved the way for 21st century women to succeed in any profession. There's great photographs, pictures, and artifacts in this that will really tell the story of this inside the secretarial pool women's liberation that was motivated by Catherine Gibbs. The next title is also nonfiction biography by Mayuk Sen, titled Love Queenie. And this is the story of Meryl Oberon, one of the first Southeast Asian movie stars to make it onto the silver screen. She won an Oscar for her role in the 1935 film The Dark Angel, and that was the first time a performer of color had received an acting nomination. Originally, Oberon concealed her Asian identity by telling people that she was Tasmanian, but eventually she came to accept her own otherness and went on to star in many other movies. Even though she was brought up in poverty, she did a great job managing her career and was one of the few Hollywood starlets of the time that did not just disappear into poverty. This is the story of Hollywood's racially exclusionary golden age and of one woman of color that broke that barrier.
The Boxcar Librarian by Brianna Labuscus is a historical fiction novel set during the Great Depression. This book follows Millie Lang, who is a writer during that time, who ends up really down on her luck. A lot of writers during the Depression had trouble finding work, so the government created the American Guide series and would send writers off to research different towns and cities in order to create guidebooks for them. This is how Millie ends up in Missoula, Montana, and how she uncovers the mysterious librarian Alice Munro. Alice Munro is known for creating the Boxcar Library, which were converted mining trains that would deliver books to men who were starved for entertainment working in rural mining towns. Alice Munro also recruited Colette Durand, who was a miner's daughter, to help her drive and staff the car. Alice and Colette went on the first Boxcar Library's journey. However, only Alice returned. Strangely, none of Missoula's residents will tell Millie about the incident, and so she's left wondering what happened to Colette Durand. This story will appeal to library lovers, history lovers. There's a lot of themes about combating censorship and the power of books and stories, as well as some history about the fight for workers' rights in the American West in these mining towns.
Mystery fans will be delighted with The Four Queens of Crime, which brings together the four legendary authors of British crime fiction: Agatha Christie, Dorothy Sayers, Yango Marsh, and Marjorie Allingham. It's late 1930s in London, and these four queens are hosting a gala to raise money for the Women's Voluntary Service to help Britain prepare for the war. Baronet Sir Henry Heathcote has loaned his home for the event, and everyone in London society is there. But the next morning, Sir Henry is found dead in the library. Scotland Yard detectives are brought in, and they discover a cluster of potential suspects among the guests. But as in many closed room mysteries, this is our third on the list, it's somebody that was at the party that had to have committed the crime. The four queens of crime collaborate with Scotland Yard to discover the killer and identify them and solve the aftermath of Sir Henry's death.
If you've ever wanted a Thelma and Louise for the 21st century, check out Killer Potential by Hannah Deach. This story follows Evie Gordon, who was a scholarship student and a graduate from a very elite university who's always dreamed of being somebody, of being known in the world. But when real life catches up to her, her student debt starts piling up, Evie ends up taking a job tutoring the uber-rich teens in Los Angeles. During one of her weekly visits to a Beverly Hills mansion, Evie searches the whole mansion for her student and their family. She can't find them, but what she does find when she goes outside are the remains of this family spread about throughout their garden. She soon hears some banging behind her, goes back inside, and finds a very mysterious woman locked in a closet. So when she unties this woman and they get out, they're quickly seen by a witness. And in this moment, they have a moment of panic. What they do is they go on the run. They begin to race across the US, creating an all-out manhunt. And Evie realizes that the only way out of this situation is to find the real killer. Meanwhile, the media runs rampant with her story, calling her the new Charles Manson, a poor gifted kid turned killer to create class warfare. As they continue their journey, Evie realizes that despite the negative press, she's finally somebody. This is a thriller, a dark comedy, a little bit of a romance, and just a super fun time if you're looking to go on the run like Thelma and Louise.
Our last book on the list is The Book Club for Troublesome Women by Marie Boswick. 4 best friends living in a beautiful planned suburb in Northern Virginia decide to start a book club. They already have it all. They have handsome husbands, beautiful children, and when they pick Betty Friedan's The Feminine Mystique as their first book club pick, they have no idea what they're getting into. In no time at all, they realize that they have their own voices. They have their own lives, and those voices and lives are currently owned by someone else, the men. When one of the characters, Margaret, goes to cash a check in her own name, she's told that she's not allowed to. She has to have her husband with her. When another character goes to purchase a car, she's told that she has to have her uncle, brother, or husband with her. This makes the women feel very confused about their place in society and their place in life, and they start to rebel in tiny little ways against the oppression that they've been living under. This is all set against the backdrop of JFK and Dr. Martin Luther King and student unrest on campuses. And I think many readers will identify with this period and will be cheering for these 4 best friends to break the pattern that they've been set in. Thank you very much for attending our Winter of Reading Winter Book Buzz. Amanda?
Yes, thank you very much. We enjoyed picking out these books for you.
Come back in the spring and hold on for our spring 2025 book buzz. Thank you.